Thank you, everyone. That was such a great conversation. Wonderful questions. I hope you're not sick of me because you have me for another hour with one more panel. But we have here with us Dr. Amy Uelmen from Georgetown University Law Center. Dr. Uelmen is also the Director of Mission and Ministry and a lecturer in religion and professional life and a senior research fellow at the Berkeley Center on Religion, Peace, and World Affairs. Her scholarship and teaching focuses on how religious values might shed light on tort law, legal ethics, and legal education, and how principles of dialogue might inform debates about religion in the public square. Amy's recent publications include 5 Steps to Healing Polarization in the Classroom and 5 Steps to Positive Political Dialogue. From 2001 to 2011, Amy served as the founding director of Fordham University's Institute on Religion, Law, and Lawyers' Work, and prior to that was an associate with the law firm Arnold & Palmer, primarily in the areas of products liability and commercial litigation. Amy is also a member of the Focolare movement and is active in its efforts to build bridges between people of different faiths and to foster an economy of communion, in which businesses operate according to the principles of responsibility to the larger community and share profits with the poor. Amy's tie to Trinity is that as a law student, she had our very own President McGuire as her professor. So Amy, welcome to Trinity.
Jeannine, I'm gonna start by turning on the microphone. Is that good? Okay. Can you hear me? I want to mix it up just a second.
Sure.
And first, to really honor the contribution that we just heard about the Pope blessing the disabled on this on this space, and I just wanted to start this conversation by connecting that right away to something that Pope Leo said in his letter of love for the poor. This is my favorite quote, and I quote this everywhere I go because he also uses the kind of zinger language that I loved so much in Pope Francis's work, and so and this ties right away into our work on the DEI conversation, and I think this is like the Pope Leo as so appreciative of the need to really turn the world upside down when we think about what are the values at stake and what are the values in this room that are so powerful in every contribution that we've heard from the alumni here. It just, I mean, if I had a box of Kleenex, I would have let myself be brought to tears because they're just so moving, also the depth of your commitment. So this is what our current Pope has to say. I mean, and he's also quoting Pope Francis. He says, as it is, and this is a quote, this is 95 in the letter, the current model, with its emphasis on success and self-reliance, does not appear to favor an investment in the efforts, and this again goes to the disabled, to help the slow, the weak, or the less talented find opportunities in life. The same questions keep coming back to us. Does this mean that the less gifted are not human beings, or that the weak do not have the same dignity as ourselves? Are those born with fewer opportunities of lesser value as human beings? Should they limit themselves to merely surviving? The worth of our own societies, our own future, depends on the answers that we give to these questions. And here's my favorite line. Either we regain our moral and spiritual dignity, or we fall into a cesspool. Isn't that powerful? And so I think we have such tremendous resources with Pope Leo coming in. Okay, sorry for that outburst.
No, that was great, Amy.
We'll go with that outburst as we talk about the battle around these questions of DEI. You can tell I'm a litigator, right? So
I love it.
Okay, so here we go.
It's dangerous to have two lawyers up
I
here.
know, we're dangerous.
Two different types of lawyers, but I love it. So Amy, you and the former dean of Georgetown's Law School, William Traynor, recently published an article in America magazine entitled, "At Jesuit Universities, the Government's DEI Crackdown is an Attack on Religious Freedom." A longer version of the article is going to be published very soon in the Jesuit Educational Quarterly. But can you share with us what happened in early March 2025 that led to this article?
Yes, I have some notes because I'm quoting from some of the documents. And so in March of 2025, the interim U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia, so that would be like the chief federal prosecutor for our district, Ed Martin, sent a letter to Dean Traynor, Bill Traynor, about the Georgetown University Law Center curriculum, which is none of his business. The letter opened, "It has come to my attention reliably that Georgetown Law School continues to teach and promote DEI. This is unacceptable. I have begun an inquiry into this and would welcome your response to the following questions. First, have you eliminated all DEI from your school and its curriculum? Second, if DEI is found in your courses or teaching in any way, will you move swiftly to remove it?" So the letter also included a direct threat to Georgetown's current students and alumni. At this time, this federal prosecutor wrote, "At this time, you should know that no applicant for our fellows program or summer internship or employment in our office who is a student or affiliated with a law school or university that continues to teach and utilize DEI will be considered." So, what are the two big problems with this letter? First of all, it is not the job of a federal prosecutor to be directing what a university can teach or how to teach it. The Supreme Court has continually affirmed that among the freedoms central to a university's First Amendment rights are its abilities to determine on academic grounds who may teach, what to teach, and how to teach it. That's a First Amendment right. And then second, the letter challenges Georgetown's, or if we could apply it to any other religious school, Georgetown's ability to live out its mission as a Jesuit and Catholic school. So Dean Traynor wrote back, "As a Catholic and Jesuit institution, Georgetown University was founded," and this echoes so much of what we've heard in this room today, "is founded on the principle that serious and sustained discourse among people of different faiths, cultures, and beliefs promotes intellectual, ethical, and spiritual understanding. For us at Georgetown, this principle is a moral and educational imperative. It is not optional. It is a principle that defines our mission as a Catholic and Jesuit institution." So let's just take a second, what is going on here? Why are we fighting about this with such ferocity, right? And I think part of the challenge is that people generally, when they get into these fights, do not define their terms when they talk about DEI, right? There's some nods here. They do not define their terms. So when Dean Traynor and I, and I'm happy to also, the longer article is not published yet, but it's public. I'm happy to share that with anybody who's interested. When Dean Traynor and I refer to the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work, these words generally mean what they do in everyday language. And so for this reason, we can cross-reference and ground our defense in the values of the much deeper and older 2,000-year-old Catholic intellectual tradition and the now 500-year tradition of Jesuit spirituality. And in this sense, commitment to what may be termed DEI is not an end in itself, but a means to better pursue and manifest the mission. So there is also a second sense of DEI, and I want to also just drop a credit to our new incoming President Eduardo Peñalver, who is very helpful to Dean Traynor and myself in kind of teasing out these two different definitions. So there's a second sense of DEI that can refer to a set of commitments rooted in often really contested academic theories, theories about knowledge, and theories about social change that are the subject of like very broad debates, and they have implications for our university environments, and they're the source of debates. So what was happening in the March 2025 attack on our school by the interim U.S. attorney was an attempt, I believe, to weaponize the confusion around these two understandings of DEI. And so collapsing that all of the debates fall into the category of these contested academic theories. And so in our case, because the U.S. Attorney did not define the term DEI, but instead attempted to use it as a blunt and destructive instrument in a way that threatens to interrupt things that are actually, right, President Pat, very ordinary and very constructive, and not really the source of contested academic debate of what it means to create a community that is welcome, that thrives on the diversity, as we heard again about the ecosystems that bring the voices of so many people together. This is very ordinary work and should not be the subject of debate, the work to build healthy educational communities of dignity and support. So that's the fight we're having,
Yeah.
Jeannine.
It's a good fight to have, right? So Amy, I know you and I have had this ongoing conversation about zero-sum games. And I was so happy to see in the article that you have this description of how some of our fellow citizens here in the United States see DEI as a zero-sum game. Can you explain to us a little bit more about what the zero-sum game of DEI means and the cultural factors that can lead to this perception of DEI?
Yeah, and I think this is really one of the most pernicious cultural threads it's weaving their way through a lot of the Supreme Court jurisprudence. So it's a set of assumptions that when you read these assumptions as a Catholic, you're like, that does not compute. That is not my vision of society and where we're going. So a zero-sum game, as with the best model, is your chess-playing kids, right? So, so that it's a game where there's no opportunities for mutual gain or loss. And so one person wins and another loses, like a game of chess. So in negotiations, the perspective would be that my gain is necessarily at the expense of the other party. And so the often unstated premise for the attack on DEI programs and policies is that they necessarily push down and squash the identity and interests of those who are seemingly not the beneficiaries of these efforts. So that they sort the world into undeserving winners and otherwise deserving losers, and it's a scramble for scarce resources, and it concludes that this is unjust and unfair. So that's the vision of the world, and there would be numerous accounts of this narrative in recent cases. And so these rest on like the Horatio Alger stories, the stories about how anyone can get ahead and run the race as long as they commit to hard work, excellence, and individual achievement. And the executive orders are full to the brim of this kind of rhetoric. So of course, hard work makes a difference, right? We know that. We're sitting in this room, right? And after working hard in our education, in our careers, but these stories downplay or ignore some very important lessons from history about the effects of racism and economic justice on individuals and community. So that's that's a huge part of the challenge. And so, for example, when we go back to the Good Samaritan story, the question is not only what's going to happen to the guy on the side of the road, but for a Christian, the question is, what's going to happen to me if I start to foster a culture where it's okay to walk by the guy on the side of the road? And so this sense of we are tied together, the zero-sum game model does not recognize that.
Yeah, that zero-sum game model is if you have a piece of pie, I can't have a piece of pie, right? Versus the Catholic theology and the Catholic ecclesiology of a family Sunday dinner. Mm-hmm. If extra people show up for dinner, you just pull up a few extra chairs, right? There's always enough food. There's always enough to go around. Amy, your article really highlights that for Catholic institutions, DEI is not an option. It's not a product of contemporary concerns, but rather DEI is a principle of the gospel and Catholic social teaching. Can you share with us, we've heard so much about what Catholic social teaching is, but can you maybe share with us specifically how DEI is rooted in the gospel and Catholic social justice?
Absolutely. So again, I'll emphasize there are some theories of DEI that I would not agree with from a lens of looking at it through the lens of Catholic social thought. And so, and there are strands of the scholarship that are deeply contested and that would be in some tension. And so Catholic social thought sharpens our critical perspective, I think, in a 360-degree range, right? So we need to keep our critical eyes open. But I think we can safely say that Catholic social teaching turns a lot of these zero-sum game ways of looking at the world right on its head. And so, but even deeper than that, when we see our work for equity and inclusion through the lens of a theological understanding of unity in diversity, then, oh my goodness, the resources just open up. The depths are unfathomable. And so the secret, the kind of literary key to all of this is in the name of your school, right? It's in the life of the Trinity. And so the human quest for meaning and the sense of identity patterned on the dynamic life of communion at the heart of the Trinity, the relationships of the persons of the Trinity within the one divine substance, there we see the dynamic nature of unity in diversity. And so part of what the work that Dean Traynor and I do in our scholarship is to say, look, this is not just like pick a pope. This is a massive consistency that runs through all of the teaching from the Second Vatican Council and on. And so one of my arguments is one of the incredible heroes of this work is Pope Benedict. Amazing, right? Pope Benedict in the document Charity in Truth, Caritas in Veritate. And so there's this incredible description of human relationships patterned on the life of the Trinity, in which true openness to the distinct reality of others leads not to a loss of individual identity, but what he describes as profound interpenetration. And so we better understand who we are when we open ourselves to others. And so let's take it even a step further. Not only do I understand who I am, but when my core sense of identity is grounded in and shaped by being a member of the human family, the universal human family, then what happens when I love my neighbor? I find who I am. I find my path to fulfillment in God. So I can truly say to my neighbor, thank you for the opportunity to be in relationship with you, because you have given me what I most desire, which is this life of unity in God. And that's where Pope Benedict's theology brings us. So, coming back to the zero-sum game, concrete work and even sacrifice to improve economic and social structures can be framed not as a loss, and much less a zero-sum game, but as an opportunity for the kind of reciprocal exchange in which we discover, and again, this is Pope Benedict, what it means to live in relationships of gift for each other.
Thank you, Amy. That was beautiful. So Trinity is a Catholic institution of higher education rooted in the mission of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Mour. And I know I saw Sister Maureen in here earlier, and I see Sister Mary over there. Can we give a round of applause to the sisters who have given us so much here? Founded over 200 years ago by St. Julie Billard, the Sisters of Notre Dame de Mour have had as their mission to serve those in the most abandoned places and to give them tools for life, to change lives, dismantle unjust systems, and to alleviate poverty through education. Georgetown is a Jesuit Catholic institution of higher learning. Can you share with us the vision that St. Ignatius of Loyola had for the Jesuit order?
So I took a little crib sheet, this could be like a talk of like 3 hours, but it won't be. And so it's just three bullet points. So in a nutshell, this is I cribbed from the U.S. East Jesuit province, and I think it really dovetails beautifully with the vision and the work of St. Julie Billard. And so it says, in the vision of our founder, we seek to find God in all things and commit ourselves to the greater glory of God. The Jesuit mission has long been dedicated to spreading the gospel, reaching out to those on the margins, and educating men and women for others. And so I think Jesuit spirituality is also known for how it can inform the work of discernment, to understand how God is working in our lives and in the world, and then in this light, also a sense of direction for how to better serve those who are entrusted to our care and those on the margins. But I want to go back to the comment we heard earlier about these are big issues, and are we big enough, right? And how we understand that. And then I think that comment right there is just enough wisdom for the whole day. And so this question of like, how do we know what to do in a concrete circumstance? What might it mean to be responsive to the needs of the people around us? How do we know how to implement these values of inclusion, of equity in a diverse society, right? It's a question of also knowing how, as Chris pointed out so beautifully, this work of reading the signs of the times. And then, so I'll just share a tiny example, very tiny. I was accompanying a friend of mine in my Focolare community. I live in a Catholic community, and we were at the hospital. She needed some, for cancer, she needed some tests, and so I was waiting in the room where she was getting her I was waiting outside where she was getting an MRI. And I noticed this lady who came in, rushed, and who spoke only Spanish. And the receptionist was trying to communicate that she was late for her appointment, she would need to reschedule. And so I'm sitting there, I have Italian, but not Spanish, not good enough to navigate a medical situation. And I was like, okay, so if you intervene, here's somebody who's feeling alone and scared and doesn't have the language. If you intervene, you might make a mess because you don't have the language either. And so I'm sitting there going, okay, this is my neighbor, right? How do I communicate in some way that she is not alone in this circumstance? And so I was sitting there going, oh, and then my friend walks out, and my friend it speaks Portuguese, has Italian, and more Spanish than I do. And I was like, okay, I'm here for the purpose of helping my friend, and she just had, just took something to get her through the MRI. Do I lean into my sick friend in order to help this lady who speaks only Spanish. And I looked at her and my friend, and she looked like she was doing pretty good. And so I said, yes, I do lean into her. And so she, as we're walking by, all I could say, I looked at her and I said, "Ayudo?" And I mean, meaning trying to say like, "Do you need help?" Right? And she looked so relieved. And then my friend stepped in and was able to help her sort out. So immediately the atmosphere in the office, in the reception area, changed. The receptionist became totally relaxed and smiled ear to ear. The lady felt just, cared for. We sorted that out. We ended up walking to the elevator and the parking lot together, and she poured out what was going on, and I understood probably 2/3. And I felt it was like really that dynamic. It was not choose my friend over. So this work of discernment, of figuring out how is it that we respond in a concrete situation. I think, again, we need the Holy Spirit, that visits Rome and everywhere else, right? I mean, we need the Holy Spirit in order to understand what is the concrete response in a given situation.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So the sisters and the Jesuits share a similar mission, as we just heard, to engage in educational ministry and to serve the neediest and advocate for social justice. Trinity's mission statement includes this line: grounding in the mission of the Sisters of Notre Dame de Mour and the Catholic tradition, welcoming persons of all faiths in order to achieve the larger purposes of learning in the human search for meaning and fulfillment. In a way, Trinity and Georgetown's missions are very similar, specifically the part about mission that serves as the basis for Georgetown's DEI work. Can you reflect on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can even go back to the earlier quote from Pope Leo, right? I mean, we find that this work of whether it's at Georgetown or at Trinity or at Catholic or any of these schools, what we have the possibility to do in our university environments is to cultivate this conviction that we are one body. We are one body, and the more that we open ourselves to love and care for each other and to learn from each other, the stronger we're going to be, both as individuals, as people, and as a society. And so there would be so much, I won't belabor this too much, but there would be so much in the work of Pope Francis that helps strengthen that. And I think we're going to have just a treasure trove in what is coming out with Pope Leo. In an educational environment, we have everything to lose when we exclude the perspectives and the experiences of those who have been marginalized. And I think this is the conviction that we have to carry with an incredible strength of steel in this moment. And Pope Francis helps us by saying those who are on the periphery are to be included because they have something truly to offer, right? It's not an act of just, breadcrumbs and charity, right? It's something that we absolutely need. He writes, they have another way of looking at things. They see aspects of reality that would otherwise be invisible to the centers of power where weighty decisions are made. And so in a city like Washington, D.C., this is exactly the kind of witness that we need. And then specifically, again, with regard to migrants, Pope Francis notes, an individual and a people are only fruitful and productive if they are able to develop a creative openness to others. So for example, in some of the commentary on Pope Leo's love for the poor, people are like, where's the instruction manual? Give us a detailed account of exactly how we should go about this. And he does, by pointing to the religious orders. It's like, if you want to know what this looks like, go and look and see what have the Franciscans done, and the Dominicans, and the sisters here in this very institution. It's a very clear kind of a witness and example of where we need to go.
Yeah, Amy, I think the sisters' approach to DEI work here, and certainly also our president's approach here, is it's just what we do, right? It's how we act, how we live, how we breathe every day. You know, Trinity is the only institution in the DC area that's been designated as both a predominantly Black institution and Hispanic serving institution. That's a way we do DEI work every day. Trinity's financial aid programs are the most generous in DC, allowing college hopefuls from traditionally underserved communities and first-generation college-bound women the chance to afford a quality higher education. That's how we do DEI work here, right? So your article lays out that a university's mission is protected by the First Amendment. Which First Amendment freedoms protect a university's mission, and specifically a Catholic higher education institution's academic freedom?
So as we noted at the beginning, and I realize this is standing between us and lunch, right? So so we won't get into too much detail. But as we noted at the beginning, it's the First Amendment free speech rights as an organization, and then also the religious freedom argument. So I'll just give the guts of this that come from a Supreme Court case from 1957. So here's kind of the heart of it, and if anybody gives you trouble, you can just go right back to this language. So, it is the business of a university to provide that atmosphere which is most conducive to speculation, experiment, and creation, and you decide what that means at Trinity, right? And so it is an atmosphere in which what prevails are the four essential freedoms of a university: to determine for itself on academic grounds who may teach, what may be taught, how it shall be taught, and who may be admitted to study. And this has been with us a long time. And then, even more robust in an institution like Trinity, is the First Amendment's guarantee of religious freedom. So in our case, the prosecutor was pressing into that, and if anybody messes with you guys, they would be pressing into that as well. There's a long history of having articulated this in light of the religious mission. This is not just a footnote to some history of Trinity in a dusty library. This is living and active in every person in this room. And so recently, the Supreme Court also made clear in a case that has a wonderful title, Our Lady of Guadalupe School, that the First Amendment's guarantee of religious freedom protects an institution's own autonomy in the kinds of decision that go to the heart of their central mission. And I think if anybody walked through this door, there would just be no debate about what is central to the mission of Trinity. It's written on everybody's faces and in everybody's comments that we've seen so far.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So before we open the floor up for questions, and I know lunch is back there, I see it. Can you maybe in your parting words just share some words of encouragement to everyone gathered here, our alumni, our faculty, staff, and students, about the role of Catholic institutions in DEI?
Well, I would just flip that and say I am just so deeply encouraged by what I've heard from you this morning, and I think that if we can let Trinity's light shine, don't put it under a bushel basket. Tell the stories about how you have been formed in this environment and how you have carried that into public life, into academic life, into commitments in the community, into service of every kind. I think that is one of the most powerful witnesses that we need right now. And then there would be lots of creative ways to continue to figure out how to get kind of a cross-fermentation. Times are so difficult. It's difficult to be in conversation with people when there's tension or polarization. And so the continual effort to let your light shine and let that witness of the work that you already do and have been doing your whole lives. Maybe we need to give it up for those who are here 50 years celebrating their, right? I mean, it's just amazing. Also, a huge applause for all of the alumni coming back. And so I think you show us what it means to put some skin in the game, in your own relationships and your commitments in society. And so I think the word of encouragement is keep going, but also keep telling the story and keep telling the Trinity Washington story, right? The specific story of what you learned here and how you've carried that through your lives.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do we have some questions for Amy? I see one in the back.
Thank you. I am a theologian. I started with Trinity with religion, theology, and social justice, but I was also ordained in the Baptist Church and in the AME Church. I also met with the people who family was sold to keep Georgetown. I'm doing something with them. But I have a question from a womanist theology approach as it relates to DEI. It is a terminology that was first used as affirmative action for equality of a people who were enslaved. Then it emerged into DEI. I lived through that in the government. But the DEI portion, which you did not put on the table, was created for white women. And those were the ones who really got impacted under this new administration. So if we're going to be honest as it relates to social justice, which Trinity always has been, it is one that we're looking at the brethren want the white women to go back to be owned and property. So they want to destroy that image of future young ladies. So that's how my perspective of the DEI looks like as it relates to religion. So do you have any response for that?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest challenges right now is so many of the debates gloss over a sense of history and the wrongs in history. And so, for example, I think within Georgetown's own history, the responsibility that we have to own that deep wrong and to repair. That's also part of our Catholic responsibility and heritage, to repair for the wrong that happened in the sale of the 272. And to tell the story, right? That story does not go under the carpet, right? But that story, that's something that each of us at Georgetown should own, and should own with a depth of understanding that history. And so I think a huge part of the problem of some of the debates now is we lose a sense of history and of the wrongs in history and the wrong turns that we took that then resulted in serious injustice in communities, in families, to individuals. And so when I was in law school, one of my favorite images in thinking about the why of affirmative action, my Jewish law professor, Mike Gottesman, who argued many cases in front of the Supreme Court, he said, well, you know, if you dig a hole and push people into the hole, then you have a responsibility to help get them out, right? And so this sense of the consequences of the pernicious racism and injustice that permeate through our society, I need to own that, also as a white person, right? And then as a society, we need to own that together. What is it that we need to do? And so I think one of my deepest wishes is that we not lose our sense of history and the wrongs of history and how we own them. And I think Chris Ann's work with the Catholic Mobilizing Network and Restorative Justice also connects to that work as well. I mean, the depth of the work that we need to do to repair on the basis of deeply owning the wrongs of the past. And the good news is when we own those, and we lean into this sense of being one body and one humanity, we find our own humanity, right? So I have everything to gain from deeply recognizing those concerns and also being ready to do everything I can to build a society where that doesn't happen. So.
Thank you, Amy.
I want to thank Amy and Jeannine. Thank you. And one of the reasons why I was so eager to have Amy talk to us was not only am I proud of my former student, and she learned the lessons well, but in fact, most people in this room I'm sure know or have read, even just this week, University of Virginia caved in on the DEI issues. Major universities, very elite places, are walking away from their commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion because they're being intimidated and coerced by our government. And Trinity will not do that. I just am telling you now, Trinity is committed. We have our protections, but we have our faith. And we will do everything possible to continue on the course that Sister Julia McGorty set 127 years ago. We're not going back. Thank you all.